Welcome to Douglas Robbins' Den of Discussion. Today we're speaking with author and educator Karl Beckstrand. Welcome, Karl.
Hey, thanks for having me, Douglas.
How are you doing today?
Doing great.
Good, good. So let me ask you, man, you're coming out with your 28th book. That's very impressive.
Yeah, I've been writing for a couple decades, so yeah, it's fun.
And what is your 28th book about?
So it's actually a pair of books in a series. I've done one novel, and the rest are mostly juvenile books, picture books. So I have a series of picture books on immigrant children, and volumes 3 and 4 will be out by June.
So I was looking at your site, Premio Books. It seems like you have a kind of a group involved in Premio Books, and you mentioned that you write multicultural books.
hmm
And it seems that, and I see that you're obviously an educator. A lot of the book subjects, polar bears, the stars, the earth isn't flat, sleeping and cooking and all these things that really the whole landscape of a child. Are you is the point of it, all the books to be educating where sort of school might be failing a bit or
Yeah, when I was a kid, I didn't like to read, and I certainly didn't like to write. But it's because for years, a lot of the books that I was exposed to were boring school books.
right?
And once I got my hands on a book that transported me, was fun and entertaining, then I was hooked. And so I just like to, um, number one, entertain, but number two, yeah, I always want to have the child walk away with more information in their head. And if it's entertaining, they don't even know they're learning.
Right, right. Yeah, funny. I was not an avid reader either when I was a kid. I was fascinated by things, but it always seemed many of the books, like you're saying, very just heavy-handed and more of an obligation than a joy. And
Right.
perhaps that's how they were presented more back then. Until I found this one book, The Island of the Blue Dolphins, and
Ah,
I was just in love with the book, read it over and over again. Um, so it seems like in the country, there's a lot of conversation really about the education system and what are we really showing kids how to navigate the world as adults. They're not learning about cooking or about uh, um, debt
managing money.
or
Yeah.
finances, and it seems like you're trying to sort of address those topics in many ways.
Yeah. I have a book called The Bridge of the Golden Wood, a parable on how to earn a living.
Yeah.
And it's just a simple folk tale about a little boy who is near a stream, and an old woman says, "These fish are trapped. Can you help them?" And he just does a nice deed, but he finds a way to get compensated by helping. And so I just wanted to show kids that, if you look for needs, you'll see opportunities that can often pay off.
So much of what we're taught when young is sort of that individualistic, get yours before someone else gets theirs. Um, to go back to in education, we're not really taught so much about community and charitable works and doing good things. It's often about, well, what do you want? Well, you want the cars, you want the house, that sort of the material things,
Right.
but that's not the deeper part of our characters that satisfy us ultimately. And so I'm glad you're writing that because we're all trying to move forward, and I think it's time these antiquated systems or institutions move forward as well.
Sure. Yeah, we certainly have a lot of room for growth.
Just a bit. Um, so let me ask you. So are your biggest audiences just sort of like families or kids buying your books online or something? Or I know you're an educator, so you're going to schools and speaking.
I have done a lot of that, less since COVID.
Yeah.
Um, but my target audience isn't children. I don't know if you've had the experience of reading a book to a child and being bored out of your mind.
Right.
But my target audience is teachers, librarians, and parents, because they're the ones who are going to buy the books.
Yeah.
And so I always try to have something in the books that will entertain them so that they won't be dying of boredom, because that's the worst torture when it's a
Right.
pedantic book, you know?
I think that's what, people became more aware of with even movies and a lot of things that are kid oriented. There's enough in there for, say, Disney movies and whatnot for adults, that many adults love going to those movies or reading those books.
Yeah.
Harry Potter was more of a kid's book, but my goodness, everybody loves Harry Potter.
Yeah.
There's
Pretty
no
good.
there's no age limit for it.
Right. Everybody loves a good story.
Everybody loves a good story, and who doesn't like wizards?
Yeah.
So yeah, Carl, if you want to read a passage from your book, Grow, and maybe introduce it as well.
Sure. It's a very simple picture book. It's called Grow: How We Get Food from Our Garden. And it's just exposing children to some basic concepts of where food comes from, because a lot of kids might think it comes from the grocery store.
Right, right.
So yeah, I just it's it's a lot of poetry, but it starts out outside my window. I see green leaves and light. Days like today make me smile. I love to work in my garden. And then it goes to till and turn, hack and hoe, plow and plant, mulch and mow. Uh, January to June, harrow and weed. April to August, water and feed. Sow by row, graft and grow. And then I'll just jump a little bit. And it has great illustrations. The artist is Zanara. She's from the UK, and just great illustrations that are simple and help kids understand what's going on. And my favorite quote is, "Rocks in my pockets, soil in my hair, mud in my nails, dirt everywhere." So, and then it shows all the foods that come out in the harvest.
Yeah, that's fun. I like that, and great imagery. And again, like, kids don't. I mean, for the most part, kids just they want to get dirty. They want to get in there,
Yeah.
not worry about their clothes, and really want to kind of get in there and play in the soil. I'm curious, and I don't know, maybe you would know better than I. So Dr. Seuss, right,
Hmm.
began all these rhyming books,
Yeah.
and I'm curious if that was. I guess that it must have been with old Mother Hubbard and all those books. Books that were rhyming or poetry
Right.
that were actually kids' books or children books.
Yeah. There's been some debate. I think there are people out there who think rhyming books are boring or passe, old fashioned. But at least when I was growing up, I found that that really helped me learn words, and
Yeah.
really helps with not just vocabulary, but with how you put sentences together and things like that. So not all my books rhyme, but some do.
Yeah, but it's nice because there's a rhythm, there's a musicality to it.
Sure. Helps them to be remembered, I hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think because of the rhyming, um, it has that imagery. The imagery sticks a little better and a little clearer.
Yeah, I hope.
So you're also, besides a writer, you're also a media professor at a state college. What on earth does a media professor
Yeah.
do, or what does that mean exactly?
So I've taught journalism at a local university, and currently I teach digital media at a trade tech college. So digital media is photography, video, audio, animation. We use a lot of the Adobe Creative Suite.
Mhm. And this is what you're teaching to students, and as a from a journalistic point of view.
So when I taught journalism, I did go into photojournalism a little bit. Now that I'm doing just digital media, it's all, it's all digital now. It's all
Yeah.
the graphics, logos, web design, anything that has to do with audio, video, things like that.
And I'd imagine, for maybe someone going into college, that this is a rapidly growing field.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very popular class, and there's always going to be need for designers.
Yeah. as writers. Yeah, absolutely. Always pursuing good book designers. So let me ask you, when we first were introducing ourselves to each other, you had written to me that you're an expert in contrasting traditional with digital and self-publishing and sharing insights on how to get a story out to the world. Well, as a writer, I'm always curious on how to get more exposure, discoverability, because that's the hardest part of writing. I mean, you write and it's a huge challenge in itself, and then you have the marketing, the
Yeah.
other aspect. One is very personal and intimate and isolated, and then the other is, okay, world, now check me out. But that's one of the big challenges, obviously, is that bridge from point A to point B.
Yeah, that's the real work. You think that you're sweating blood when you're writing, but the real work is the marketing. And
Right,
even if you have a traditional huge publisher, one of the big publishing houses, they'll still want you to do a lion's share of the marketing because you're the best spokesman for your book.
right. So
So,
what would you suggest?
so I've published both ways. I've worked with two publishers, and then the rest of my books I've done myself. My early experiences were painful. My very first publisher died the day we printed my first book.
Oh my
The day
goodness.
was to go to print. Yeah. So, and he was a small publishing
Hopefully
house.
your book didn't kill him.
No, he actually died of food poisoning, but it was unexpected for all of
Oh,
us.
wow.
It was a shock. But I had, it was actually good for me because I learned the industry. I had to reach out to his contacts and make sure that things were still being done right, and had to figure out, shipping and all these details, in publishing. And that's what eventually got me to be a publisher, is all that I learned from that. But it used to be that the big publishers had control and prestige, and you wanted that. You wanted what they offered. But now anybody has access to the big distributors. Anybody can, of course, handle their marketing, and it's nice to be able to control your own content. It's to be able to control the money for sure. And so now when I speak on publishing, I'm biased. I tell people, I've worked with publishers. It's easier to do it yourself.
Well, the amazing thing obviously is if you're trying to do traditional, and that's fine, they're the gatekeepers, the agents, the publishers, they're the gatekeepers.
Right.
And you bust your butt to write something, and then it's a sort of hurry up and wait, and hurry up and wait for
Yeah.
perhaps a long time.
Yep.
And the alternative is the self-publishing. And like I said, you have to do a lot of the legwork anyway.
Hmm.
Um, but again, so if someone's going to say publish through CreateSpace or Amazon or KDP or
Right.
Ingram, I don't remember the,
Yeah.
like, what would you say? Okay, you now have your paperback, and you also have an ebook. What would Carl do if you could give some nuts and bolts of what would Carl do to get his book out there?
Sure.
Email list? Would you use social media? Would you try to do some publicity or just run some ads? What kind of steps would you take?
Well, you've given the basics already. Yeah, Ingram is ideal for hardcover, print on demand. Amazon's KDP is great for soft cover, and Kindle, of course. And then I use another service for ebooks, smashwords.com, and they
Right.
will get your book to all the major ebook platforms. And all of these services, well, Ingram charges a small fee, but getting your book uploaded is free. You don't have to pay for that. What you want to pay for is editing beforehand and making sure that your cover
Sure.
design is outstanding. Um, but then, yeah, for marketing, you want to have reviews. So you want to reach out to anybody and everybody to comment on your book. And then, yeah, social media, emailing. I have vast lists of librarians and educators that I email regularly. And then, yeah, press releases can get you free publicity. So those are the basics. Reviews uh, are the are most important for sales. I see reviews and sales tied together
Yeah.
tightly.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely a lot of legwork in doing all that, and it doesn't leave a lot of time for the writing
Yeah.
itself. Um, but a necessary evil, obviously, if you're trying to make it as a writer and a successful one.
Yeah, and I can give you an example of why it's so important to do the marketing, even if you have a big publisher. I've been in several authors groups and clubs, and one of the best writers I've ever known, her name is Connie Walker, and she has a fantasy series, and she's beyond outstanding, and yet she's terrible at marketing. She's not motivated. She's got health issues, and so these gems of fantasy books are sitting there on Amazon, hardly touched, because of the lack of marketing. And so, yes, it is a lot of work to write, but you have to prepare and plan to do a lot of work on the other side as well. You just got to do it.
Yeah. It sort of runs counter to most writers because most writers, in certain ways, obviously, they're introverts to whatever degree.
Hmm.
Um, and writing is a very intimate process. And then, and then the opposite, really trying to beat down people's doors, and say, hey, pay attention, look at this over here. And it's quite unnatural. It's unnatural for me in certain ways to do that, but it is a necessary evil, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, you've always heard of the author that did almost no publicity and word of mouth, and they just got famous. And that still may happen once in a while, but that's not the norm.
Yeah,
So yeah, people can't buy your book if they don't know it exists.
absolutely. And the word of mouth, obviously, is still key. But when there's millions of books you're competing against, it's hard to get that word of mouth even out there at all. So, Carl, I just wanted to double back on something regarding grow and the eating
Uh-huh.
from our gardens and from the earth. And I think it's so crucial that awareness, of eating. We're trying to eat a lot better here, less meat and more whole foods and less processed foods. I guess the less hands that touch it, et cetera, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. But there's so much, as you were saying, like kids think, well, food is from the supermarket, right? And I
Right.
think a lot of people are just so disconnected from the food. Let me shove a burger in my face or eat a steak or whatever it is without, in a sense, being involved in that process.
Right.
And there really is such a disconnection between that cow on the farm and me shoving a burger in my face
Right.
without earning the burger, if you will, without having, not. And I wonder if how many people actually had to slaughter cows or pigs if they would eat them still, or if
Yeah.
they would do that. Yeah.
Good question. Yeah, the book is doing it's all of a sudden my bestseller. I've had one book, one of my first books that has been traditionally my seller for years, but this Grow book has just taken off. In fact, the Georgia Farm Bureau bought it for education purposes. They
Oh,
bought a
no
bunch.
kidding. That's excellent.
Yeah. So I think the concept is it's timely that people are hopefully getting back to being able to provide for themselves as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, obviously, a lot of sickness and illness because of the foods we consume. So,
Yeah.
and those habits obviously start early on in life.
Yep.
All right, Carl. Well, do you have anything else you would like, to add or share with our listeners?
Sure. I have a series. I mentioned the series on child immigrants. It's called Young American Immigrants. But I also have a series of bilingual picture books. So they help teach Spanish or English, depending on your native language. And they have a pronunciation guide for both languages at the beginning of each book. And they're little mysteries, picture books. They're simple, but they have a focus. Like one focuses on opposites, one on colors, careers, one on interrogatives, question words. And those have been really popular in libraries and schools, just helping kids learn Spanish or English.
Well, that's excellent. That sounds like a great series.
Yeah, and it's fun to involve other cultures, not only as the characters in the stories, but a lot of my illustrators are from other countries. I have illustrators from Spain and Israel and the UK. It's fun.
Nice. Well, it sounds like you're doing good in the world.
Well, it's work, but it's something I love.
Right. Yep. I understand. I understand. Well, Carl, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. And you can find, excuse me, Karl Beckstrand at premiobooks.com. I assume people can also find you on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles.
Right, it's Carl with a K, Beckstrand.
Okay. Well, a pleasure, sir, and you have a great day.
Thank you, Douglas. You
Thanks,
too.
Carl. Bye bye now.
Bye.